Welcome back to Munro Live. So today we have the chance of looking at the 2025 Chevy Equinox EV RS. Now you may have noticed that in a lot of the reviews that I do, I always talk about price and pair that to my opinion of the interior quality, or how much do I think that they're actually giving the customer. So for the RS version, this has a base price of $43,000. With all of the trim options that this vehicle has, it puts it up to $52,000. But there is a version of this that starts at $35,000. So I'm thinking, between $35,000 and $43,000, that's actually coming in at the lower end of a lot of the EVs that we've reviewed. Most of the vehicles that we've reviewed have been around the $50,000 to $65,000 range. And that's where I kind of float in how critical I'm being. Like, are you really offering me enough for this price? Is it just because it's an electric vehicle that I'm paying this price point? But to have an electric vehicle that is offered at $35,000, that actually puts us in line all the way down to the Chevy Bolt or even that Skywell that we've been tearing down in price point. So my review is going to focus around that price point and what do I see, what do I think that is being offered for that. So first, before we get into the interior, I do want to make mention of a few things about the exterior. Now, styling lines. Styling lines are some of the things that we end up fighting with on studios a lot. Like, how am I going to make this shape? What does that shape flow into? I like that this vehicle is in a red. Again, my favorite is actually blue. Blue just kind of shines and it shows off all the different curvature in the body. I'm looking at this style line here, which is quite crisp and pronounced. As it blends around the fender, you'll see it disappears into the door. And the door is just completely smooth and rounded. And the line picks up again on the rear end. When we reviewed the Chrysler vehicle recently, I was talking about some of those different lines, and I made mention about the lower door cladding. And I said that I'm certain that the Chrysler studio had designed a straight line, but they had to put a notch in this cladding here. Now they had to put that notch in order for it to clear the front door. You'll notice that there is no notch in this one. Why is that? Well, if you actually look, you'll see there is a cavity or a pocket inside of that cladding on the front door. This door still cuts into that cavity without needing to have a notch. So when I was consulting with surfaces and designs, that's one of the things that we would talk about. It's like, you realize that you have to have this condition or this condition in order to have this type of shape. The overall look of this vehicle, unless someone told you it was an electric vehicle and you noticed a little blue symbol on the side, you wouldn't know it's an electric vehicle. And I think that's part of the point. We know a lot of the EV startups. We know the look of a Tesla, the look of a Rivian. All these vehicles coming out basically wanting to tell you, I'm an electric vehicle. Now, for early adopters, that's perfectly fine. They want to be the first one. They want to show off. They want to say, look at my electric vehicle. This, however, if it's driving in a grocery store parking lot, other than the sound, you really don't know it's an electric vehicle. It has all of the same look of a traditional ICE vehicle. And once we get past those early adopters and we're trying to get an electric vehicle in the hands of more and more of the general public, something that is that comfortable for them to purchase and own, I think will be important, and I think that this kind of fits into that mold. So are we looking into a frunk space? No, we are not. This is more of a traditional underhood engine bay. Now, I think that's important. This is service only, really, because you don't have a general customer access of some sort of a frunk or storage bin and whatnot. But let's talk to the person who's at the service department. They have to work on this vehicle. Take a look. Even though some of the components are unique or different from a traditional ICE vehicle, this still looks like a traditional engine bay. Look at how much access I have to get in here, work on something, change something if I need to, access to my 12-volt battery. This is another type of a feature that makes someone comfortable purchasing, comfortable owning, and comfortable servicing their vehicle. So having something like this, is this more valuable than having the feature of a frunk? That would, of course, be up to the customer, the purchaser, to determine, but if I was in the service department, I would much rather work on this if need be. So if you remember back to when I was talking about the Chevy Bolt, I do believe, it's when I made the comment of Taco Bell interiors. And it's because I've been doing this so long that the technologies that are used to make the individual components, when I went from that Bolt all the way up to the $80,000 Mercedes, they were all made with the same type of technology, they just had a different look. So I was a little critical, I think, on that one of the Mercedes, because what are you really offering me that is unique? What are you offering me that justifies this price point? So when I look at this door, what this reminds me of a lot of the Skywell door that we just tore down. The upper panel, thermoformed skin. We have a wrapped armrest mid-bolster, which it was wrapped on the Skywells as well. However, the Skywell had a live stitch on it. Going below that, it's just injection molding. And just like the Skywell, the switch pack cover and the pull cup are all one component. The Skywell had a faux wood decorative inlay. This one is painted. Still the same type of a grille for the speaker area. So this has basically all of the exact same construction and components of that Skywell. That Skywell, even though it's not available in the US, was a $35,000 vehicle. This, in its base version, is $35,000 to $43,000. So in all honesty, this is a competitor in price point to that vehicle. It makes me want to tear one of these apart. I want to see what is inside of those doors, see what's inside of that, see what's inside of that instrument panel. So I want to look at this vehicle from 2 points of view. The first is the driver. Again, I'm saying that this is going to be the traditional ICE vehicle purchaser, traditional ICE driver, who is switching over to driving an EV for the first time. This is not the early adopter who wants to see all the EV-specific bells and whistles or something new. This is something that, or the customer is someone who wants things to be comfortable. They want things to be familiar. And I think that this vehicle offers that. Even though there are large screens, this still has all of the same buttons, your stalk, your windshield wiper. Everything works the way a traditional buyer would expect them to work, without having to go onto YouTube and try and figure out how you turn something on. So I think this makes it comfortable for that purchaser. Now, for that price point, for someone who is purchasing a vehicle, which this one at $52,000, what am I really offering? So we mentioned the door. Looking at the instrument panel, this is a vac form material, again, similar to what we reviewed in tearing apart the Skywell. I kind of pick on that heads-up display. Look at that huge monument just floating in space. Why would you make something that pronounced? My opinion is that they took a feature that was designed for another vehicle and they're trying to fit it into this one, and that was the height that they needed, the overall position that they needed. Because I would assume most studios would want to try and hide that feature rather than make it so prominent. Looking at everything else, okay, yeah, sure, we have painted surfaces. So this is not piano black. This is actual painted. We still have chrome. We still have some of our inserts. It's not overly stylized. There's not a lot of components because look, this is 1, 2, 3, 4. That is 4 decorative components on the center console, other than the thermoform skin or wrap skin on the sides. So even though it's generally appealing in its look, it's not very expensive. They haven't thrown a lot in there that says, oh, look at how much money they spent. So have a look at this lighting detail. Now, we've seen this lighting detail on some vehicles where these are actually a bunch of laser cut holes, but this is all one smooth surface. I'm trying to figure out exactly how they're doing this. So this could be a polycarbonate material that has some paint, that paint is masked. Sometimes you can laser cut just the painted surface off, give something nice and smooth. There's a possibility that this is electroluminescence paint. I reviewed that over a decade ago. It has this type of a color look. Again, I wish I could tear this apart to really see how that is being done, because that's a very smooth, attractive feature, but that's not actually a bunch of holes. So I do need to make mention of the color change here in the door. See, blending out from red to just the same dark gray interior color. Now, this is being done in paint. Having it done in paint is a little easier. I worked on something similar to this on the Cadillac Celestique. The color, what they're calling, was Opera Ombre, where they had a red and black fading out. In that instance, however, it was on the leather. And doing that on leather is very difficult and very expensive because you have to have that color change in a very specific area. You can only cut your pattern from that area and you have to throw away everything else. This is a little bit easier because you injection mold your part, then you put the paint on afterwards. You can control it from part to part without having as much waste. The style, however, you would think that it would make more sense if the entire door blended out and had some sort of a change. Going directly from this gray to that red, back to that gray, it kind of sticks out, but not opposed to it. And of course, this would be a style choice that the customer would have to pick. So if you like that look, that is what you would have or what you would choose to purchase. I don't know what all the options are, but I'm probably pretty certain that there are some trim levels that don't have a feature like this. Now, unfortunately, in general, GM seats for the past several years I've been very critical of, just because the seat foam, the seat overall construction, in my opinion, is not very comfortable. Now again, I'm a big guy, so they're probably not catering to my body size. And again, I drive 2 or more hours per day. I'm constantly in my seat. I made the comment way back on the Tesla Model S, saying, if you're going to drive your vehicle 100,000 miles, is that seat a pleasure or is it a prison sentence? Personally, I do not like the comfort of this seat. It feels very hard. It doesn't feel like it actually hugs my body. The cushion, I don't care for my body size, me personally. Now, the overall look, I think, is somewhat stylish. All right. We've seen the perforated inserts a lot. Normally, whenever you have a ventilated seat, you're going to have some sort of perforated insert. But the fabric, the two-tone in the weave of the fabric to give you the black to red, mimics what they've done on the doors with the paint. Now, that is on the seat cushion, and it's also up here on the seat shoulders. So in looking at the thread, we have this silver that is carrying over from this fabric piece down across the vinyl into the seat. Now we have a blue and a red stitching. So 3 colors in total that they're bringing together to make this seat. Now that is just the decorative thread. Then you also have your join thread. The join thread is most likely black because you want it to match your fabric. Now, I've had this debate in some of my production plants. How many machines does that make? Well, I have a double needle machine set up to do the silver, so I don't want to do a thread change. It's always going to be silver. I have a flat join machine set up with the black, so I'm going to have that set up. Now I have this blue and this red. I can do a double needle machine there as well, feeding in 2 colors, which means I need at least 2 top stitch machines. I need set up with the different colors. I need my flat sewing machine set up. And then I'm going to need some machine with a piping foot set up. So you would most likely flip this through up to 5 different sewing machines to make this seat cover. Look at these side air vents. Now, having these large rounded air vents, it's kind of common. We've seen that style for quite a while in several different vehicles. But just look at those red lines in there. That thing really looks like a turbine engine. I kind of like the overall look. Chrome, our turbine decoration, the ability to adjust. Thing that I hate costing air vents. These things are always a pain, trying to account for all the different manufacturing steps, the different materials, and the cost. I hate costing air vents. Okay, so now I have to go back to this vehicle cost. $52,000 vehicle. This one starts at $42,000, but it's offered at $35,000. So from the rear seat compartment, what is being offered to me for $52,000? I think the decoration on the door inlay, that two-tone, that's one of the things that they spent money on. But the rest of the door is fairly basic. They haven't spent money there. The other is the rear seat heating. So the rear seat heating controls are here. There's really nothing much else on here. I do have a couple of USB ports. I have my controls, but again, just traditional mechanical air vent controls. I don't see much in the rear occupant that says $52,000 for me. I see the $35,000 to the $43,000 for this. Comfort, again, it's not very comfortable for me. However, the one thing that I like is my head does not hit the ceiling. I have that problem a lot. We're trying to match the curvature of the roof. My head hits the ceiling in the rear seats. So for that 43 range, this is actually expected. So looking in the rear compartment, again, I'm trying to set my expectations. We have a load floor, carpeted load floor, and this is actually quite a nice material. So I don't know if this is a material upgrade for the price point or if this is also on the base. The hinging load floor, you'll see it actually does have a living hinge in the carpet. So I'm not trying to fold up or lift out the entire load floor. We looked at a couple of vehicles recently where it was all one big piece, where you basically had to take it out to get to anything that was below it. Now, the one thing that I do criticize is they have that hinge so far back. Basically, this is wedging into the sides for me to try and open it while I'm grabbing whatever I need to get to. Now, it looks like that there are two positions for this load floor, here and above. So it looks like I could possibly set this thing lower and put it down to the lower edge. Gives you a couple of more inches inside of the cargo space. Question is, are you ever actually going to do that? Because you'd have to try and reposition your toolkit there in order to use that lower area. And that's, of course, if I'm even correct. Now, what else is being offered for the customer here? There are a couple of tie downs. Now, the tie downs are towards the rear of the vehicle. I normally prefer them a little farther forward, and it does not appear that we have any farther forward, because normally if I'm trying to tie something into the rear, I want to tie it back. I'm not tying it out. Do we have a power outlet? We have a 12-volt outlet. I don't see a 110-volt outlet for this vehicle in the rear. Now, what are you using this for? Again, if you have an air pump that happens to run off of 12-volt, that is nice to have that here rather than trying to put it into your center console to air up your tires, especially if the air pump is already here in the trunk. So I like that, but 12 volts are kind of starting to get pretty old now. Fewer and fewer people are making new components for 12 volt. I think a 110 would be appropriate going forward. But again, I think this is more of a traditional vehicle, something that is being brought forward into the electric world. And for that customer, maybe that's something that's more familiar, more comfortable for them. So in closing, my thoughts on the 2025 Equinox EV RS at $52,000, which this vehicle is trimmed out as. I don't specifically know what trim components have been changed from the $43,000 version. I'm hoping that it's just some of the decoration, maybe the wheels. But at $43,000, if it has these similar features, just maybe presented in a different way, I think that this can be a very exciting vehicle for a lot of buyers. At $35,000, I'm assuming there are probably some major things that are different. The whole set screen is probably going to be different. There's not going to be a heads-up display. I honestly think that it would be very interesting to look at that vehicle as well. So to you, if you were a customer or if you were a consumer, if you don't really like the styling of the Tesla, you're waiting for something to be more familiar to you. Maybe you're very, very jaded saying, I'm never going to drive an electric vehicle. They're ugly, whatnot. Are you sure? Is this something that is very, very similar to something that you're currently driving? It just happens to be an electric version. So thank you very much for watching, and please subscribe to see future Munro Live videos.